Brother Victor Hutchinson. You can just raise your hand. Guest, sorry. Past President Brother Pedro Shepherd. Past executive members, Brother Rich Mark Brother Dwayne Goddard. Members of the present executive of the Barbados Union of Teachers. Past principals and present principals. Members of our union, media personalities, ladies, specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. At this time, I will ask Sister Stacia Sprayer, executive member, to bring fraternal greetings, and Sister Julicia Hens to give fraternal greetings. The church children.
Good morning, everyone. Fraternal greetings coming from the Congress of Trade Unions and Staff Associations of Barbados. And it reads, in a fast-changing global environment that is characterized by the accentuated use of various technologies in the delivery of education, training, and the everyday life of people, it is expected that the leaders in education would want to recognize the value of restructuring and reorganizing the education system. The change in nature of work requires that there is a repositioning of the education system to meet the needs and expectations of the labor market. The theme for the 49th Biennial Conference of the Barbados Union of Teachers, BUT, Reshaping Education by Prioritizing Our People, is therefore appropriate for this time. The indicators suggest that the Barbados Union of Teachers, as a professional body and a trade union, understands the importance attached to education as a basic tool and its connection to the transfer of knowledge and the acquisitions of skills which are fundamental to human development. Along with this would be the recognition of the urgent need to drive the transformation process in the world of education, ever conscious of the link it holds to national economic development. With the need to build the capacity of the island's human capital, teachers are expected to be conscious of the new demands in the education of the people, which are triggered by the changing nature of work, the increasing emphasis on innovation, entrepreneurship, and the development of the third sector. The Congress of Trade Unions and Staff Associations of Barbados compliments the Barbados Union of Teachers for having envisioned the need for a well-educated and trained workforce, one which is equipped with the knowledge and skills that the society and the labor market demand at this time. It is anticipated that the 49th Biennial Conference of the BUT will benefit from some useful discussions on the theme, and that the outcomes will prove to be valuable in shaping the education policy, in meeting the goal of enhancing the development of citizenry. This is from Dennis Lapisa, General Secretary of CTSA. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those greetings, Sister Sprayer, and to Brother Lapisa. At this time, I would ask Brother Rudy Lovell, our president, to give his address, the president's address.
Good morning. Before you begin, let me inform you that I'm having a little sinus issue since I entered the room, so I may be sniffling a little. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Featured speaker, Brother Professor Dwayne Devonish, PhD Professor of Management and Organizational Behavior, Department of Management Studies, Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of the West Indies. Mr. Dennis DePisa, General Secretary of the Congress of Trade Unions and Staff Associations of Barbados. Mr. Richard Green, General Secretary of the National Union of Public Workers. Past Presidents and General Secretaries of the Barbados Union of Teachers. Specially invited guests. Executive members of the Barbados Union of Teachers. Members of the Barbados Union of Teachers. Members of the media. Ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 49th Annual General Conference of the Barbados Union of Teachers. It is a pleasure to be able to address you at the annual conference face-to-face for the first time since being elected as your president. Over the past year in review, the Barbados Union of Teachers has been busy dealing with several issues. During this address, I will highlight a few of these issues while proposing some solutions. Firstly, I wish to extend appreciation to all those persons who worked closely with the BUT over the past year in the interest of our members. This includes the Minister of Education, the Honorable K. McConney, the Permanent Secretary, Ms. Betty Aline Headley, the Chief Education Officer, Dr. Ramona Archer Bradshaw, the Deputy Chief Education Officer, Mrs. Joy Adamson, Education Officers, the Director of the Education Technical Management Unit, ETMU, Mr. Francisco Miller, and other officials of the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training. I also wish to acknowledge the work of the Congress of Trade Unions and Staff Associations of Barbados and the Caribbean Union of Teachers. Thank you for your support. It has been an incredibly good year for the Barbados Union of Teachers. The BUT continues to fight long and hard to advance the interests of our members. This agitation over the past year has led to the growth of our membership by 135 new members. This deserves a round of applause. If there are any new members at this conference, please stand and be acknowledged. Thank you. There appears to have been an increase in violent acts or publicizing of these acts among school children over the past year. When will it end? So far, we have encountered fighting, stabbings, and even firecrackers. Teachers and students cannot take any more of this bad behavior. Enough is enough. On May the 18th, 2019, the government of Barbados convened a meeting at the Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Center to discuss violence in schools. At that meeting, Prime Minister the Honorable Mayor Amor Morton noted that bad behavior among the student population will not be tolerated, and that, I quote, "If we allow this to happen, we will be surrendering our country to lawlessness and to young people who will not come to appreciate that their behavior is unacceptable in every form," end quote. Other speakers at the meeting noted that the methods being used to resolve problems with deviant students must change. Deviant students should be placed in the state's care to assist with and resolve their bad behavior. Disruptive students must be taken out of school to stop the school environment from becoming toxic. The state of some school plans does not easily facilitate teaching, and the Office of Student Support Services is understaffed. 4 years after that meeting, some of the problems identified may have worsened. Given this, The BUT is calling for full implementation of the items promised and for greater dialogue with all stakeholders in education regarding deviance among our school children. Also, the BUT has received several reports of teachers being threatened with harm by parents. In 2 instances, teachers were advised by the BUT to take out restraining orders against the offending parents. Let it be clear, the BUT has zero tolerance regarding violence of any kind and will not hesitate to act in the best interest of the teaching and learning process. Our members' lives matter. Teachers face deviance from students and parents, which is quite worrying. The BUT condemns all acts of violence at our schools, and we want our schools to be safe environments for students and teachers. To truly reshape education, we need to prioritize our people and find solutions to the above-mentioned problems. Recently, the Minister for Crime Prevention in Barbados, the Honorable Corey Lane, on the 11th of January 2023, in the Nation newspaper, called for a tough stance on bullying. Moreover, on the 13th of January 2023, the Executive CEO of Supreme Counseling for Personal Development, Sean Clark, called for anti-bullying laws and school protocols. This is after Mr. Clark implied in an earlier article that teachers do not know how to deal with certain situations that arise with deviant children. He may be correct in some cases. Before these gentlemen spoke, on the 15th of December 2022 in the media, the president of the Barbados Union of Teachers called for, and I quote, stiffer penalties to be imposed on secondary school students who commit violent acts on school compounds, end quote. However, unlike the other 2 individuals, he was criticized and made his second appearance on Naked Departure, which indicated that the president of the BUT was seeking to criminalize poor people's children. Nothing can be further from the truth. I fear that if their behavior is not addressed early, some of these students may go on to lead a life of crime and end up killing someone or getting killed. We have had the unfortunate death of a student in 2019 and at least 3 previous student deaths. Let us hope that such tragedies will not be our new normal. But we should not be relying on luck to ensure that violence in schools does not escalate. Our students need to be taught how to employ effective anger and conflict resolution strategies. There must be an increased effort to provide psychological support to at-risk students and their parents. More guidance counselors, support services, and safety officers. Moreover, parents must instill the right values in their children. Furthermore, the Ministry of Education urgently needs to hire additional psychologists, as the present complement is woefully inadequate. Let us be mindful that our students today will become employees, caregivers, service providers, and future leaders. As we grapple with indisciplined and ill-disciplined students, educators are searching for effective methods of disciplining these categories of students. While some people have focused the discussion on corporal punishment, we know that it is not widely used in schools, and we encourage our members to familiarize themselves with the legislation that guides its use and to be guided by their principal. The BUT strongly believes there needs to be a discussion on methods of disciplining indisciplined and ill-disciplined students. While the Ministry of Education has attempted to address this issue with the 2004 Draft Student Code of Discipline and the Draft 2019 Barbados School Code of Conduct, today we are no wiser on how to deal with the issue of indiscipline and ill-discipline in school, as it remains a concern for teachers. Having spoken earlier about violent threats on teachers by parents, security at some schools remains a concern, and we know that close to 40% of our schools do not have security guards or adequate security. And there may be more. These include St. John Primary, Ellerton Primary, Workman's Primary, All Saints Primary, the Irving Wilson School, Hildeskeen Primary, Gordon Greenwich Primary, St. Silas Primary, Hillary Turners Hall Primary, St. Elizabeth Primary, St. Catherine Primary, St. Bernard's Primary, St. Lawrence Primary, Mount Tabor Primary, Elliott Belgrave Primary, Ignatius Boyer Primary, Half Moon Fort, St. Philip Primary, and St. Jude's Primary. At the secondary level, Princess Margaret Secondary School only has one security guard, and the members at Frederick Smith Secondary School are crying out for increased security, especially in the morning period. The absence of security personnel or adequate security can be a challenge and may expose school occupants to intrusion or acts of violence. We are therefore calling for all schools to be assigned adequate security personnel. We are also recommending that school safety audits be conducted at all public schools in Barbados, and that any security gap found be immediately rectified. Interestingly, there's enough long talk in this country about productivity. Yet still, workers, especially teachers, are being asked to be productive while working in conditions that are less than favorable or conducive to their health and safety or productivity. Some of our schools suffer from school syndrome, SSS, and some are still plagued with structural issues, mold, mildew, continuous environmental issues, inadequate lighting, poor ventilation, insufficient and unsuitable bathroom facilities, and slippery corridors, alongside a lack of security, just to name a few. Oh, and may I reiterate that teachers at almost every school in Barbados are in need of suitable chairs and desks to assist with the effective delivery of education. Additionally, teachers are overworked, and it appears that every year another task is added to the already heavy workload. We may need to have teacher aides attached to each school, or a liaison officer, as these seem easier to get. Ongoing safety and health concerns at Lawrence T. Gay Primary School and issues at the Les Devon Secondary School remain foremost on our minds. The BUT will ensure that no stone is left unturned while seeking a solution to these problems. The BUT also responded to issues at Frederick Smith Secondary School, the Ellerslie School, Belmont Primary School, Welch's Primary School, Wilkie Camelback's Primary, St. John Primary School, St. Giles Nursery, St. Stephen's Nursery, Parkinson Memorial, Graydon Seeley Secondary, and Princess Margaret Secondary School, among others. Our agitation resulted in the resolution of many issues. Despite our efforts, the slower pace in addressing some of these concerns is frustrating. Some people believe that teachers will endure these unsafe conditions indefinitely. Well, over the past year, several of our members fell ill, which prompted the resolution of several issues and brought attention to others. Teachers continue to be deeply concerned for their safety and health, and we are sure our employer is aware of the Safety and Health at Work Shaw Act, especially the general duties of an occupier or employer, 6 Part 5, which states that, and I quote, "It shall be the duty of every occupier to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health, safety, and welfare of work of all his employees," end quote. The The pedestrian pace of school repairs needs to stop. In addition, it appears that reassurances by the Ministry of Education amount to nothing in some cases, as we are constantly promised that school repairs will be completed on time, to be met with disappointment at the start of every school term, as the opening of some schools is delayed. The BUT will not tolerate teachers occupying school plants during the planning week, while construction work is going on, as was done last year at several schools. We want the Ministry of Education to get it right the first time, and believe that contractors should be made to submit a Gantt chart outlining the expected progress of work to be done, while factoring in additional days for unavoidable circumstances, such as severe weather. We are also calling for contracts to be issued as soon as school closes for the summer period. I have been told by several ministry officials that the release of money for school repairs poses a problem annually. We cannot expect school occupants to suffer due to the inefficiencies of a few. School repairs are necessary and should be timely. We are also repeating the call for a maintenance plan for all public schools and for the ETMU to become a separate and distinct unit from the Ministry of Education with independent funding. One wonders what will happen if every school in Barbados had to pass a building inspection annually. Maybe many schools will have to move online. Also, note that some of our schools double as hurricane shelters, and this gives me little comfort. The above-mentioned concerns are further compounded by the fact that every public school in Barbados has a pile of old furniture and equipment waiting to be boarded. This process seemingly takes forever, and in the meantime, these items attract a range of pests, including vermin and insects. The BUT is pleading with those who are responsible for this process to put measures in place to expedite it. In addition to long-standing issues, seasonal issues are problematic. The impact of COVID and recent fires on school populations was unbearable, and some teachers were forced to invoke Section 104 of the Shaw Act, which states that, and I quote, where, during the course of his employment, there is sufficient evidence to indicate that an employee's health and safety are in imminent danger, that employee may refuse to carry out the task assigned to him pending consultation with his safety committee, trade union, staff association, or the chief labor officer, end quote. While some may argue that teachers have a duty of care to the students at all costs, my counter-argument is that teachers have a duty to care for themselves first, and then the children. And the Ministry of Education also has a duty to care for students and teachers. No one wants to lose valuable teaching time, and neither does anyone want to lose their life owing to an asthma attack or another respiratory illness. Hence, timely school closures in response to these hazards can eliminate associated risks. Despite the above-mentioned challenges, teachers continue to deliver the best quality of education possible. The BUT has no intention of jeopardizing the safety and health of any school occupant, and we will do everything possible in the interest of the teaching and learning process, while safeguarding the safety and health of both students and teachers. Teachers, continue to prioritize your mental and physical health to ensure that you can continue to provide for yourself and your family. We will continue to advocate on your behalf. As you are aware, we expect to usher in education reform soon, and it is hoped that this reform will reshape our educational landscape by prioritizing our students and our country. Surely, schools cannot fulfill their roles as places of learning socialization, human resource development, and the development of future leaders, if all involved in education are not doing what is necessary for the country to benefit from the delivery of education. For example, too many students are leaving home for school without exercise books, textbooks, pens, and pencils. And unless this bad habit is corrected, education reform will be meaningless to some. The BUT also hopes that reform will consider the safety and health concerns of teachers. The anticipated changes to the education landscape are expected to be challenging for everyone involved in education, especially the students and teachers. And for this, we must be prepared. While the reform process is still being discussed, and as we seek to reshape education by prioritizing our people, the BUT wishes to assure the Barbadian public that teachers will continue to give their best while taking steps to address some of the many challenges faced by our students, such as literacy and numeracy. Undoubtedly, some of these learning challenges can be rectified by greater parental support, identification of learning deficiencies at an earlier age, and trying to address the problems earlier than waiting till students are preparing for assessment or in secondary school. Schools also need additional support personnel, especially at the primary level. Greater resources and personnel in special needs education and smaller class sizes would also assist in addressing critical issues. Additional training opportunities for teachers and a dedicated parental program to assist parents and guardians in understanding the importance of education would also be useful in resolving some of the challenges, especially at the foundation level. The BUT highlighted the issue of literacy during our Education Week at the Professional Development Workshop. We intend to offer assistance to students in this area in the future. This process will be led by specialists Ms. Marcia Hunt and Mrs. Allison Murray, who will also guide teachers who volunteer to work with these students. While teachers continue to be lambasted, as a union, we will do our best to empower our members to assist our students however we can. We also hope that the education reform process will expand training in critical areas such as literacy and numeracy. The BUT believes that education reform is necessary, and it is hoped that in addition to addressing issues such as literacy and numeracy, education reform will address the many perceived issues plaguing the primary school system. Can you believe that the syllabi in our primary schools have been in draft form since the year 2000? This and other issues, some of which have been mentioned already, should be addressed before we roll out junior academies and academies of excellence. Nevertheless, the BUT welcomes the recent stakeholder dialogue on education reform, as history has shown that true stakeholder engagement bears fruit and ensures that measures being implemented are embraced. In the words of Helen Keller, and I quote, "Alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much," end quote. Although there may not be full agreement about some aspects of the education reform process, nevertheless, our members will participate in the process. Last year, you would have heard about the IDB survey. While the dust may have settled on this controversy, we are happy that teachers were not implicated in wrongdoing. This should be a wake-up call to all involved and encourage the Ministry of Education to have an extensive dialogue with stakeholders when seeking to implement education initiatives. On a related matter, two of our members, Pedro Shepherd and Alwyn Bob, were accused of breaking the law and were suspended for breaching General Orders 3.18.1 for participating as candidates in the general election on the 19th of January 2022. The BUT is happy that a recent court ruling supports what we have been seeing all along. That is, this action was unconstitutional. We are hopeful that this court ruling will ensure that the Constitution truly respects an individual's right to assemble freely and associate with other persons, and in particular, to form or belong to political parties, hopefully resulting in teachers, nurses, maids, and other public servants being able to participate in elective politics. I am sure that you all can agree that school leadership is a priority in our education system, and it plays a key role in improving school outcomes by motivating teachers and students. Effective school leadership is essential to improve the efficiency and equity of schooling. Principals have heavy workloads, and many teachers often hesitate to apply for this post because of the demanding tasks involved in the job, including financial and human resource management, in addition to inadequate support and rewards. Despite these challenges, the Ministry of Education wants to add another burden to those who aspire to hold the post of principal and deputy principal via contracts. The BUT has spoken about this topic ad nauseum, and we wish to inform you that we are still opposed to these contracts and will take this matter as far as is allowed by law. There are many excellent principals in Barbados, and we will continue to represent them. However, it would be remiss of me if I did not highlight the perceived bad treatment of some teachers, especially at the hands of a handful of principals. The BUT has a good working relationship with ACTS and BACS and wishes to maintain this relationship. Nevertheless, principals are urged to be mindful of their actions. The union encourages teachers to be respectful to their peer principals. However, some principals see a difference of opinion or constructive criticism as being disrespectful, and this results in requests for teachers not to be reassigned or to be transferred, very often at short notice, disrupting their lives and those of their children. This is unfortunate. Principals need to effectively manage different personalities. Moreover, the process of punitive transfers needs to stop. While the union has engaged in discussions with some principals over the past year with remarkable success, some principals appear to be anti-union, and this may lead one to say grace and interpret these actions as wicked. The BUT continues to encourage members to do everything possible to maintain a healthy industrial relations climate in schools. Consulting with your steward and following all the rules and regulations ascribed to the teaching profession can go a long way towards achieving this. Furthermore, the union is imploring you to ensure that you do what you are paid to do. We are paid to teach and should ensure we do it to the best of our ability. Can you imagine? There is a teacher who has been acting in a senior position for as long as 11 years, while others have been acting for 7, 5, and 6 years. Furthermore, some of these teachers are not being paid their allowances. Moreover, some teachers interviewed for senior positions almost 2 years ago are still to be told who was successful in these interviews. These teachers remain 100% committed to their duties and deliver instruction to the best of their ability. The BUT is calling for the Ministry of Education to urgently address these concerns. Even though we are overworked and work in challenging conditions, as dedicated public servants, teachers continue to go beyond the call of duty. For this continued commitment, teachers must be commended. However, as with any category of worker, teachers too need time to recuperate and revitalize their minds, body, and soul to continue to meet the challenges of the teaching profession. On the 17th of August 2021, the Honorable Madam Justice Shauna Griffith delivered her decision extempore in the matter of the change of the terms and conditions of service of teachers relative to term vacation leave without pay. 20 months onward, the BUT is frustrated by the lack of a written judgment regarding the court's decision on the granting of a term vacation leave to teachers. This lengthy wait for a written judgment can erode faith in the judicial system. We were hoping to have received a written judgment in accordance with Section 84 of the 2019 Amendment to the Constitution, which suggests that judges should deliver written judgments within 6 months of the decision. The BUT is hopeful that this issue can be speedily rectified to allow the court's decision to be enforced. Payment for the marking of SBAs remains a talking point among secondary school teachers. According to the Ministry of Education, the Solicitor General has supported their position that correcting and marking SBAs forms part of the duties of teachers in Barbados. What about the administrative duties, which involve uploading content to the CXC website? Since when does an employee's job involve carrying out tasks assigned by another employer? Research shows that CXC is an external exam administered by an external body. Therefore, the duty of a teacher should not extend to performing duties for the external body. Given this, the BUT will seek a mandate from its secondary school members on whether to support the call for payment for the marking of SBAs and the associated administrative duties. While payment may seem to be delayed for teachers in Barbados, research shows that teachers in Jamaica are paid for marking SBAs. And as recently as March 29, 2023, the government of Grenada reached an agreement with the Grenada Union of Teachers to compensate teachers for marking SBAs, CVQs, CCSLC, and CPA. Interestingly, teachers in Barbados who assess CXC orals are paid. So why not others? Additionally, teachers are paid to correct the Barbados secondary school entrance examination after delivering the syllabus to these same children. Not only is the marking of SBAs time-consuming, but uploading the data to the portal is tedious and frustrating. Given the above examples, a precedent has been set, and the Ministry of Education should follow the examples of Grenada and Jamaica and compensate teachers for this additional work. Given the increase in the cost of living, with everything in Barbados increasing over the past few years, the BUT under CSUSAB negotiated with the government along with other unions for a salary increase. This process was lengthy, and while a salary increase has been agreed upon, the one-off $1,500 payment is still owed to some teachers even though the promised deadline for its payment has passed. The BUT is hoping for a speedy resolution to this issue. In addition to an agreed salary increase, discussions on non-salary items are ongoing, and the Ministry of the Public Service has promised to set up a committee to advance this process. To address challenges faced by our members, the BUT proposed the following non-salary items: the provision of free eye examinations, dental and other medical benefits for teachers, the provision of paternity leave, 4 days of bereavement leave for the death of a family member, spouse, or partner, 7 annual mental health days, interest-free loans and tax-free vehicles for teachers with 15 or more continuous years of service, for primary school principals to be paid the same salary and allowances as their counterpart at the secondary level, the establishment of the post of deputy principal in primary schools, the implementation of the draft collective bargaining agreement between the BUT and the Ministry of the Public Service, which has been on the table since 2010. 3 months of election leave for teachers contesting general elections. Further, the union has made a request to the Ministry of the Public Service for a full-time paid officer and off-time for the vice presidents whose posts were recently created. These requests are critical to the effective day-to-day management of member issues, given the volume of concerns we must deal with daily. Unfortunately, we only had 2 quarterly meetings with the Permanent Secretary last year, and very often there is no response to correspondence sent to the Ministry of Education by the union, not even acknowledgement of the correspondence. And at times, missed calls to some ministry officials are not returned. This is unfortunate and forces the union to go public to have issues addressed. The union has also been engaged in monthly meetings with the Ministry of the Public Service via C2SAP, and this allows for other issues of concern to be ventilated. This communication forum is encouraging and helps to address issues that are not addressed at the level of the hierarchy of the Ministry of Education. The BUT remains affiliated with the Congress of Trade Unions and Staff Associations of Barbados, the Caribbean Union of Teachers, the Caribbean Congress of Labor, and Education International. Recently, the first Vice President, Julian Pierre, and President Rudy Lovell were elected to serve at the level of the Congress, the Caribbean Congress of Labor, as Zone 3 representatives. Also, the President was invited to speak via Zoom at the National Educators Union, NEU, Black Educators Conference held in London on the 22nd of November 2022. This event was open to teachers and support staff across thousands of schools and colleges in England and Wales. The conference was held from the 4th to the 6th of November. Unfortunately, the President was unable to participate, but the BUT was ably represented by Dr. Ian Marshall, Chairman of BUT's Education Reform Committee. And from all reports, he was exceptional. The BUT is hoping to collaborate with the National Educators Union to forge a partnership for the benefit of both unions. We had hoped to have in place a retired savings plan for our members by now, but this is proving challenging. We have held several meetings with insurance companies as we seek to find the right plan for our membership. This plan is a necessity, given the uncertainty of the national insurance scheme. No one wants to become financially dependent during retirement. So it is incumbent on us to safeguard our future. The BUT recently relaunched its membership card, and I am sure that in these harsh economic times, the discounts being provided will result in significant savings for our membership. The BUT commends the over 30 companies who have chosen to give discounts to our 2,200 plus members. The Public Relations Officer will provide more information on this achievement in her report. As noted earlier, over the past year, our membership has grown, which is pleasing. As we approach our golden anniversary next year, we encourage you to let your colleagues know that the BUT is open for business and has room for many more members. We hope to have a befitting celebration in 2024 with the entire membership. As I conclude, I am encouraging the media to continue to highlight the issues faced by our members and to promote educators by highlighting the positive work of a teacher each week and help us in reshaping education by prioritizing our people. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Solidarity forever. Long way to the UT.
If you see me stretching, I was told yesterday by a young lady that I was feeling cold because of my arthritis in my old bones. So if you see me stretching, it's the arthritis in my old bones. At this time, I want to welcome Sister Kimberly Agar, the President of the National Union of Public Workers, to our conference, and to those members who came a little late. Thank you for coming. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today's featured speaker, Professor Dwayne Devonish. Dwayne Devonish is a professor of management and organizational behavior in the Department of Management Studies under the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of the West Indies, Cave campus. Professor Devonish possesses a BSc in Psychology from the University of the West Indies, Cave campus with first-class honors and a Master of Science and PhD in Work and Organizational Psychology from the University of the Nottingham, United Kingdom, with distinction. In 2020, he was promoted to the rank of professor at the tender age of 36. The second youngest person to attain this rank at the University of the West Indies. He currently serves as the youngest professor at the institution. His main areas of interest and specialization include organizational behavior and psychology, work-related stress, health and wellness, human resource management, and strategic planning. He has published extensively on these subjects in both regional and international journals, conducted practical training workshops, and engaged in diverse research-based consultancies in these same areas for various organizations. Professor Devonish was the lead author of the National Workplace Wellness Policy of Barbados in 2019, the only policy of its kind, and currently sits as a member of the National Committee on Workplace Wellness under the Ministry of Labor, Social Partnership Relations, and the Third Sector. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Professor Dwayne Devonish.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a pleasure to be here. Let me recognize the President, Brother Lovell, and the same presidents of the various unions, their partners, the general membership. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. It is indeed, I must say that I'm deeply grateful to the executive team of the Barbados Union of Teachers, BUT, for extending this invitation to deliver this short address. Yes, short address. I was given a time and I will respect that because I know you have other matters at hand. But I want to give this short address, and I haven't prepared any speech. I normally don't. I like to speak from the heart and the head. I have a few pointers that I want to make sure that I don't miss. So there are topical sections that I want to capture. And I want to begin this address by actually making a quotation. This is a quotation that I actually found in an article in 1970. This article was written by St. Hill. He was an academic, and he published a work on reforming the public services. Reforming the public services. You can look it up. Just search on Google, and you will find that article by St. Hill, 1970. And St. Hill was recollected in 1970. The transit from the colonial status that all Caribbean states took at the time to self-government through independence. And I just want to read a quotation, just a short quotation on it. Just pull it here. Now this is 1970. He was recollecting on the Caribbean states, just as a reiteration, as they moved from colonial status to self-government. He says, as I quote, "The first major challenge offered by nationhood in these new states, the Commonwealth states, therefore, is the reform of the public services. In other words, before any serious schemes of national development can be implemented, political decision makers, as a matter of top priority, must ensure that the heritage of a colonially inspired obsession with the elaboration of rules and regulations for the preservation of law and order, precedent, and the status quo is replaced by action prompted by ideas, by innovation, and by imaginative management in pursuit of national development at a new level." I'm just going to repeat the last sentence there. And I can share this presentation. This is one that I made in a recently concluded conference of the public service. I think most of you all were familiar at the Lloyd Erskine Sandyford Center. This was a collection of HR managers in the public service. But I'm just going to read the last part of it here. He says that before any serious schemes of national development can be implemented, political decision makers, as a matter of top priority, must ensure that the heritage of a colonially inspired obsession with the elaboration of rules and regulations for the preservation of law and order, precedent, and the status quo is replaced by action prompted by ideas, by innovation, and by imaginative management in pursuit of national development at a new level. That was St. Hill in 1970. Now, more than 50 years have passed, and we are talking about public service reform still. Now, while this is a trade union, this is a labor movement conference, we cannot disentangle ourselves from the fact that the educational system has been and continues to be a creature of its colonial past. St. Hill, in that same article, if you're able to access it in the future, indicated that we were quite ill-equipped and ill-prepared to take on public sector reform, because at the time, under colonial status, for those who weren't familiar with the history of the civil service, it was run by colonial secretaries, which were intermediaries between the British, in this case, with those British colonies at the time, and of course the indigenous people. And it was only within the preserve of the colonial secretaries that things such as strategic planning, implementation, management, change management were all part. So you have a situation then that when we moved to self-government, we didn't have a handover, a proper handover in terms of the skills, because we were never part of that training that the colonial secretaries at the time had. So we had a bad rap in the civil service, because once that transition was made, and political elites through the ministers, and now what we call permanent officials, now permanent secretaries, because that's when the transition happened, these were people who had no idea about change management, strategic planning, and implementation. Now, I just painted that as a bit of history. I'm not saying that this is any way kind of condoning where we are now, because clearly after 50 years, we should really have evolved long past that. But it's very difficult to look at a present situation and not reflect at the past and the determinants of the same, especially where we are. Last year, in 2022, I was asked by the Ministry of Education to assist with the drafting of a strategic action plan for the Ministry of Education. Not for the educational system per se, but for the Ministry of Education. At the start of that process, it was made clear that consultation, dialogue, and I've heard the President, Brother Lovell, mention these key ingredients when it comes to social partnership, that these things would be leveraged. Now that plan has been prepared, and it called, very clearly in my writing of the plan, it was called that all unions, not just the educational institutions and the management of the same, but all unions, and of course, families, parents, children, would be party to the input into the plan as well as the implementation of the plan. Now we know as civil service agencies they're quite slow to act. But it was only last month, again, it made the impression on the management of the ministry that they need to engage the trade unions, especially as far as the implementation matters. And I make it clear that for the ministry to thrive, for the educational system to thrive, and when we talk about the education system, oftentimes we forget the trade unions, and we think about, oh yes, the schools and the education institutions and the government, and yes, and the parents and the family. But within that ecosystem, the trade unions play a vital part. In fact, they represent the core of labor. Because if you look at any strategic plan for any transformation, education, what we call the smart ministry, tourism, health, it requires an engagement of people. And if the trade unions, especially if you look at the origin of the trade unions, whether it's in the Caribbean or in some domicile elsewhere, it was always the heart of the people. That was the labor movement. So it would be remiss of any governance structure, whether it's a ministry or even if it's in the private sector, to not recognize the input and the value that a trade union brings to the table, especially going back to that note that I read out to you about how in 1970, St. Hill was talking about this, because it was 1970, if you remember, when we transitioned from, in 1966, we transitioned from the colonial status, that we are still having a conversation 50 years past. I've written an article with a colleague of mine, Maya Kelman, who's an attorney at law, I think 2 Sundays ago, and it was on implementation deficit disorder. Those people came to me and said, well, Devonish, you created that. I said, no. I didn't coin the term implementation deficit disorder. But the article was a recollection of what it is and the kind of perennial challenge that we've had when it comes to having beautiful things on paper. You could have a trade union like this, you could have a ministry, like the Ministry of Education, having a quite articulate, well laid out policy, program, or strategic plan. But when it comes to getting that plan or policy rolled out, I call it implementation headache. And within that article, if you go back a few Sundays, you can see some of the things that I called out as key drivers for implementation deficit or implementation failure. And one of the things that we have to really look at, outside of resource, I spoke about resource constraints and resource issues, but we like to use resource issues and resource constraints, and they are important as determinants of implementation success or failure. But we have to look at communication, consultation, and dialogue. And I keep telling people about the first step for any implementation effort is setting a vision and being able to communicate the vision. It was my grandmother, and I can tell you that my grandmother taught me most of what I know. She didn't get to secondary school because of poverty. She didn't make it to the evening common entrance. But she used to teach her grandchildren and children too, but mostly grandchildren, because she didn't have the fortune at the time because of her age to instill what she instilled in her grandchildren, that she would have normally done for her children. That it is important, a very important asset, that we recognize that people matter. You see, you can have all the qualifications in the world. You can have all the PhDs and so on. But there are many people who stand in leadership positions and do not know how to communicate. And that's one of the most basic soft skills. And she would tell me, soft skills are the hardest skill. And she doesn't know what they call soft skills at all. But they're the hardest skill to learn. I have people who are professors like me, people who are PhD, can't talk, can't communicate, can't articulate a vision. So let me talk about my first topical issue when it comes to implementation deficit. And I hope it's not just a lesson for, yes, the wider civil service in which we sometimes battle as unions, because it's good so that we battle and we challenge, but it also we have to remind ourselves that we are still a microcosm of the very society that we battle within and against. So let these lessons also be part of your management as a trade union, because a trade union is an organization in and of itself. But let's talk about communication. I tell my students oftentimes that communication is not just transferring information. You can have all the information there. The Ministry of Education can come and say, but we have the plan there. Curriculum reform is there. We have the information there. We've provided it to you. But you argue, but you haven't allowed the environment for us, the space for us to input our reaction to this particular plan that you've laid out. You haven't given us the opportunity to participate in the process itself. And that is also communication, Communication is a two-way street. When you hear a husband come to his wife and say, I tell you this, and I tell you this, and I tell you all these things, you're telling me that I haven't communicated. But I keep telling you that communication is also listening. You know that? It's receiving. Thank you, Madam. It's receiving. But when we define communication as passing information. But it's passing information, but it's also taking time to receive the information. So it's about listening. Given the opportunity for people to listen, given the opportunity for people to respond, for people to input. That is what we call dialogue. It's a two-way street. So when we have people who sit in positions of power or in positions of authority that may have all of the qualifications, and please, I'm not someone to knock qualifications, especially someone that has qualifications himself, but to recognize that qualifications are not, solely the mechanism for us to lead, but recognizing that there are a lot more that we need to instill in our leaders. The ability to communicate. So I impress that, yes, the Ministry of Education recognize that communication is, and I'm not just saying communication in the wrong sense, but genuine or what we call authentic communication. Communication that comes not just as a checkbox. Okay, we sent an email to the union and they didn't respond, So we take that we've communicated. But there's an authentic, meaningful engagement between the parties, all parties that come to play in this process. One of the other things I want to talk about is the fact that we've lauded for a long time the social partnership. Now, I 39 years. The social partnership has served us and continues to serve us well. Let me be honest. But when we talk about the social partnership, oftentimes, even in our small local circles, that we think that the social partnership is the Prime Minister who sits as the chair, the head of capital, the private sector, we got the head of the union, and that's the social partnership. But let me tell you this. The social partnership does not begin at the top. The social partnership begins at the bottom. The social partnership is how a principal treats her teaching staff. Social partnership is how the head of maintenance at a school treats his maintenance officers. Social partnership is how the president and his executive team treat their members. Social partnership are the micro relationships that we have in this room here and beyond. That is what true social partnership is. The relationship between that parent and that teacher. The relationship between that student and his or her teacher. When we start redefining social partnership as those individual-led relationships, then trust me, you're going to see a difference as we move up. But we tend to take a top-down approach. As we move up, we recognize, because as you think about all of these entities, every institution is a microcosm of the wider society. So yes, we can complain about the political class. Man, if then people corrupt. Then the political class can complain against the civil service and the PS. As St. Hill had written in one of his pieces, if you read back the same piece, he said in 1970 ministers were upset with the PS. The PS, the permanent secretaries at the time, because they were too slow. But the PS, the permanent secretaries, were equally upset with the ministers saying, but you got your hands too much in here. Now that was happening in the 1970s. So there's a recognition that when we talk about social partnership, is that yes, there will be conflict. And let me just say here, conflict is functional. But most of it, because there can be dysfunctional conflict. Because if we look at the pandemic, if you think about the pandemic, this government made a lot of missteps. They did good steps, but they had a lot of missteps. And it was only when certain quarters of society had spoken out, whether it was union or just civil society or the general populace, whether it was the alphabet system, if you all remember, we had the alphabet system, we were locked in. And it was only when we had conflict, we had dissent, that change happened. So I would never come here and say that you should not agitate for what you want. Because that's the natural origin story of a trade union. But recognizing that within that conflict, within that agitation, that you keep, not at the back of your minds, but at the front of them, that who really matters in this whole conversation. So yes, your membership, teachers, are who you're fighting for. And you're fighting for them because in themselves, they have constituents too. They have themselves, yes, and they have constituents. They have students, they have parents, they have an ecosystem that they relate to. And he's saying that I will call for government. That you too have your constituents. Yes, you have your public officers, but you have the stakeholders that may not necessarily be public officers that you interact with on a day-to-day basis. Whether it be what we call the third sector, civil society. And this is very important. I remember a few years back, I won't call the name of the organization, of course. It was a public sector organization. I do a lot of work on strategic planning. I was called in to do strategic planning, and I was found quite embarrassed. When I arrived at the court, I was in the room, a room similar to this, in the same public service entity, and I was probably not as many persons here, probably 30 or 40. And this strategic plan was already prepared because I met with the staff and management and so on. And they came up and said, Devonish, you know what they told me? They said, Devonish, we like you. We like how you talk pretty, man. We like you bad. But right now, we're ready for the industrial strike. We only come here because we like you. But we're going to deal with this management. And I felt embarrassed. Because here I had a remit to come to deliver and implement a strategic plan. And management was obviously the same way. To recognize that their people were ready for protests. And it tells me a lot about, I call it leadership crisis, that we have, not just in this country, and it's not peculiar to the Caribbean, but we have a leadership crisis. And again, I like to go back to history. So my other subject is on leadership here now. That we have a significant leadership crisis. And now, a crisis can be averted, of course, but with early and targeted action. You think about leadership, and if you go back, and this is something that has haunted us again in our colonial past. As one leader moved, and we can talk about this in the private sector, and I'm going to use this, I'm going to restrict this to the black entrepreneurial class. Now, there were many texts out there, and there are many texts out there, sorry, that have recollected how second and third generation black businesses were not able to carry on because of the absence of succession. And I keep reminding people about succession. Succession is so important, you know. We talk a lot about succession. If you think about it, when a grandmother or grandfather passed away, and all the children fighting for the land because he or she did not leave a will. And we've had that history, right? But the succession goes beyond that into the organizations that we inhabit. Because we have leaders, and it's all due respect to whether it's trade union or ministry, but we've created a society where we praise leadership and not necessarily the office of leadership. So there's a theory called great man theory that says you have a person in the leadership position for years. That person is the union, that person is the ministry, or that person is the prime minister. The prime minister becomes a person and not just the office. And God forbid, when that person goes, whether through resignation, retirement, or death, you leave the organization scrambling. Yes, in shambles. Because that leader, as strong as he or she was, there was no transfer of skills. There was little preparation. And I use the same metaphor with the civil service in the 19th when we transit. Because when we moved from colonial to self-government, the civil service had to move because at that time the civil service on the colonial structure was only about lawmaking, law and order maintenance, tax, and general administration. Because remember, the civil service in colonial wasn't the civil service. Now, that was only for to keep the states in stability. But because we were moving to self-government, it meant that we had to change. We had to be focusing on people development. And we were never prepared because there wasn't that succession planning. Because those guys were ready to give it to y'all. Let's give it to the former slaves. They got handed the civil service now. And the same, if you think about it, that same metaphor, we apply it here. Because I've seen too often organizations. The same organization was talking about more than 60% of the staff are over the age of 55. Or 50, yes, 55, 56. So I'm saying the next 10 years, you can see the kind of exodus and then resultant shambles that the organization will be in because of poor succession planning. And I see a president here, and I'm hoping that at some point, because remember the lessons I'm going to put here, not just for the people that you interact with, your stakeholders, but also for you, that you put in place a system of succession, where that by the time he leaves, that the next person who takes the hat of leadership, whether it's the president or whatever leadership, and it's not just the president because there are other executive offices that you all have, that the persons taking up are prepared, that it is a natural, nice transition or handover. So, and that goes back to people's skills. The ability to talk about communication, so communication begins here. You'll be able to communicate, teamwork, conflict resolution. All these soft skills that y'all talk about that children should have, we want our children to have in the schools that you should be developing in yourselves. But yes, it begins there, but we have adults that we still have to treat to that have never had the experience of soft skills training. But we have to put that in place. And I remember talking to my grandmother the other day. And the other day is about a few years back. I call it the other day, she said. I use my Bajan parlance. And she says, square pegs. And I thought about it. And I thought about it heavily. And I said, but square pegs and round holes. We talk about square pegs and round holes, And I came up with this theory. That there's nothing wrong with square peg, Think about it. The concept of a square peg and a round hole is not necessarily the square peg itself. Because the square peg could have been in a square hole. Think about it. But when that need for transit or sanctioned, let's say in a leadership role, because that person was never prepared, never rounded. Think about the word rounded. You ended up now with a person who was competent, proficient in an existing role, now in complete mismatch in a role. And people say, but I thought this person was efficient. Because you look at the individual, but not recognizing that individual has to be developed. Cool. So when we talk about the theme, reshaping education, we talk about education not in the formal sense, but all forms of education, all forms of training, all forms of lifelong learning. And we've had a lot of square pegs in round holes because of that lack of succession or that improper. Yes, and I'm speaking, thank you for that. Quite kindly, somebody reminded me that it's present tense. And we continue that. And until we rectify that through proper transfer of knowledge. But also, let's be honest, it also requires those who are currently in leadership positions to have the ability and willingness to share knowledge, to have a genuine interest in and not necessarily younger, but those folks who are being prepared for taking on these leadership roles. That there's that continuity and improvement. I use the word continuity and improvement at the same time because you would want your latter half to be better than your first half. And that's how we move. I know it's difficult. But if we are reminded of these I call them first principles, that is not just about the technical qualifications, it's also about the social skills, or what we call the soft skills. We are reminded of that. I want to talk about another key issue, and that is linked back to the implementation, but sometimes our hyper-emphasis on legislative and policy changes. Now, yes, let me just say here that any legislative change within a reform effort, whether you're reforming the educational sector, you're reforming the civil service, you're reforming the trade union movement, requires, yes, a form of policy or legislative change. It is the starting point. I have been party in developing the national policy for persons with disabilities. And I can tell you this, yes. I submitted the document to the ministry for, of course, so that they can forward to the cabinet. But I can tell you this, that policy, which obviously would inform legislative changes, because there's a bill that's going to be obviously be vetted at the level of cabinet and probably will go back out. But you can talk a lot about legislative changes, right? And I've heard people speak about this. And let me just tell you this is not the only one I did. National Policy for Aging. I created that policy only a few months ago. That was submitted to the cabinet. That requires changes in legislation when it comes to elder abuse, for example. There's a policy coming up soon called the National Youth Policy, which I also wrote. That's going forward to the cabinet, and that requires some legislative changes. In 2016, I did a review of the Justice Bill. Well, the Juvenile Offenders Act, which we're still under, and which is then making its transit to hopefully the Justice Bill, and then the Juvenile, what they call it, the Youth Justice Bill, or the Youth Justice Act, once it's enacted. And there was a statement that I made, and I'm going to make it here, in terms of our hyper-emphasis on legislative change. You can change all the legislation in this world. You know, there's a term that says, or there's a saying that says that you can't legislate behaviors. You can talk about, right now, close to you, not adjacent, quite close to you, to your remit, is this Education Act. When was the last time the Educational Act was changed? I'm 39. The Education Act is older than I am. I've heard the President mention the syllabi that weren't changed since 2000. Draft. My apologies. But let's go back to the Educational Act. Now, when you change that act, there's a recognition that companion to that change of any legislation, that the systems, the processes, the practices, and let me say this, the mindsets of all parties and mechanisms that are consistent with that act have to also change. And I think we kind of missed that. Because if you would, let me give you a perfect example. Within the juvenile justice bill, when I made inputs into it, when I did a full review of the justice systems, GIS, and when people talk about what happened at GIS, that was already reported in 2017. I submitted to the last administration. Because I wrote B and D and all kind of things, it was there. That within that, let me give you one example. There was a call for how young people who were being tried, because as you know, if you're 16 or 17, you are tried as an adult in Barbados, if you didn't know. Because of the, again, a colonial mechanism called the Juvenile Offenders Act. The youth justice bill now allows for correction to that, to kind of raise that age, the adult age, raise the age up to 18. Now, within my recommendation, I said that the magistrates, the judicial officers, have to be trained on how to treat youth in conflict with the law when they come into the justice system. Because you could change the legislation and say that you want to give the youth voice in the court system. But if the judicial officers are not changed, the mindsets of the police officers or law enforcement who interface with the juveniles in conflict, if they are not trained, properly prepared on how to deal with them, then you're still working, I call it old wine in new skins. But that's all it is. And that's going back to the Education Act. I could change the Education Act to support the trade unions to recognize a greater involvement in trade unions in the educational system and management, things like the board and all those types of things, and to do things to help the teachers. But unless I change the mindset, the practices, the human side of things, the systems, the processes, then you're spinning top in mud. So when we talk a lot about legislative change and policy change, another reason why we have this implementation deficit is that we focus a lot on those devices being changed and not recognizing that equal or perhaps even more energy and attention has to be placed on the very mechanisms, the very people, the very systems and processes that need to change to reflect the character, the new character now that legislation has taken on board. Very important. So I take that also for you to as a challenge for you as a trade union. That when you make your changes in policy too, in your domicile here, your ecosystem here, that it also reflects changes in what you do and how you think and how you interact with each other. And I want to close off this address now by talking about, and this is very short, because I know my time is approaching, perhaps is approached. But I want to talk about quickly the 4 E's. This is called the 4E framework. And this is not a lecturing session here, but and again, I speak a lot with my grandmother, but I can tell you these 4 E's emanated from her work. And this is there's a paper that I'm writing. I've written one before, but this is a new model of implementation. So this is called the 4E framework of change management and implementation. I actually highlighted this in 2019 in the National Workplace Wellness Policy. So something that came to me over years, and I decided to kind of write it down. Now the first E, listen to this. When it comes to implementation or change, I want you to think as yourselves as a union, is education. Anytime you want to get something implemented or changed, you have to educate your constituents. Not just educate them about the change or the need for the change, but educate them to prepare them for what the change will dictate. You with me? So if I'm talking about changing, I've heard many renditions of how we're going to reform the educational sector. So if we're going to talk about moving to academies of excellence and junior academies, or if we're going to be having professionalization of teachers, which is something you imagine that you all know will be coming up soon, that you as the person implementing, or the team, or the collective implementing, must or bear the responsibility for educating those teachers, for educating the principals, for educating the partners of what that requires, what would that look like. Education is always the first starting point, because I can tell you the number one reason for resistance to change typically is an ignorance of what the change entails, you know. The thing about the people who made the loudest noise in the Brexit, you know, when they had the Brexit, for those who really knows, when the British people said, man, yeah, we want Brexit. When you did the research, right, it was because a lot of people didn't even understand what Brexit meant. But it sounded good because the politicians who were on that side were saying, man, Brexit is the way to go and so on. But they didn't have a clue of what Brexit really is. Because they didn't have the first E, the education. And I tell people that education can be a weapon, you know. When you withhold education, and you keep the masses or your constituents ignorant, that's a weapon. You follow it? So when we talk about change, the ministry has, yes, a role to play to educate the trade unions. The trade unions, having that education, has a role or responsibility to educate its members the same. So education is your first E. But let's talk about the second E now. Now we have a lot of educated people. And we always wonder, but why is it that there's no transfer of the skills? Like I said about employees for training, but when they come back to work, I can't see any realistic transfer of skills. And they get vexed with the trainer. But the second E is called enable. There are many employers out there, and I say employers loosely because it could be the trade union, all of us are employers here. There are many employers who believe that yes, education works. But you know what? They're not willing to create an enabling environment in the workspace to allow the education or the learning to be transferred. And I keep telling people that don't blame the educator, you blame the university. I'm not going to be starting here to defend university, but people argue about use university students didn't do anything. But I said, but what have you done to allow for any transfer? Because it's a two-way street. So we talk about creating, yes, the educated workforce, but you also have to have an economy or a labor market, or job market that enables the transfer. I had a case in point. I had a training session a few years ago where I was doing training on statistics and using software. And at the end of the training, the students told me, yes, Devin, this was great training, but I tell you what, the manager said he's not going to invest in any software. It's too expensive. So I said to myself, wait. So I was paid to do a training session with you on a particular software, and the employer is disinclined to purchase any software. And they would argue, but how come I send these people to training and they can't implement, but you haven't created the enabling conditions? So it's a two-way street. So if you use that as an analogy for anything, it means that, let's go back to the educational effort, the reform effort, where the trade unions are critical parties of it. That yes, you could be educated as trade unions. Yes, your membership can be educated about this reform effort. But unless the ministry, government, the partners of the same create an enabling environment that is providing resources. You want professionalization of teachers? Give me the resources to allow for that. You want junior academies and academies of excellence? Telling me about it is one thing, but what are you doing by way of enabling the environments, putting the resources and the support systems to allow for the transit from where we are under a system governed by the common entrance into a new system that you're saying is going to make a difference? The enabling environment. It's no different from when the government says that, private sector-led growth. And yes, I can argue private sector organizations, some of them, many of them are quite lazy and sluggish in pushing economic growth. But the government has a role, and that role is to enable the environment for private sector growth to happen. It's one thing to have educated workers, but it's another thing to have the necessary incentives and support and resources in the system to allow for that transfer. So think about that. The second E. You got that? Educate, enable. And the third E. You can educate and you can enable. But until you, listen to the third E, engage. Engage means actively involve all relevant parties in design and implementation of that change. So you educate about the change and the consequences of it. You enable the environment to allow for the transfer. But you also have to engage people. Because enabling is one thing. But when people get disengaged, all of that enabling is not going to help you see change happen. Especially when we're talking about reshaping the educational sector. You need to engage the trade unions. You need to engage the families, the parents, the children. You need to engage other governmental entities and NGO bodies. And as I said before, engage is not you coming to me and holding a meeting and you putting it off a checklist that we have had a meeting. We've had a meeting with the union, so that means we are good. And Brother Level shook his head, so that has to be good. You know, he nodded, sorry. So you're following? That's not what engagement is. Engagement has to be authentic. And authentic means that you have to be listening to me and actively showing me that the inputs that I provided to you are being taken on board, you know. Because one thing for a wife telling the husband wanting to come home early, he said, yeah, no problem. But he's still coming home late. You following, right? That's not engagement. It's really, yes, you create that space for consultation, but after consultation, I want to hear follow-up. But we have a lot, I always say that we have a consultative culture, you know, but we don't have a good follow-up culture. So you could meet here now 6 times, and you put, but the government Barbados have met the union for 6 times this year. But what has been the follow-up? Now, let me put a caveat here. That is not that everything that you obviously want to, you're going to see on board, but we know how trade unions behave. If I give you 10, at least you give me 7. But I'm not going to give you 3. You following? So you aim for the sky. You say, well, we want this on the table for teachers, we want that, we want that. You follow, and that's what negotiations are about. But at least you come and give me 7 or 10, but I can deal with it. You follow it? So there's that recognition that there's a reciprocal relationship in place. That yes, you want something from your party, the government, your partner, and the government will want something from you too. So it's going to be that kind of mutual exchange. So engagement is critical. So I'm going to move to the last E now as I close here. So you have education, you have an enabling environment, and then you have an engaged one. But what is the number one reason for many change management exercises climaxing and then plateauing? You know, plateauing, it loses energy and momentum and it goes back. You ever remember a time, January 1st, when you said, after Christmas, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to be in gym. And then you went gym down to February, and then March, you're coming down like this. Gym done. Probably the only gym is now is you man now that call gym that you entertain. And you're going down here. You follow me? Now, what's the number one reason for that? Now, oftentimes people are not incentivized. And that's where the last E comes in. It's called encourage. Educate, enable, engage, and then encourage. When you encourage somebody, I use that E in a kind of a paradox way. That means it incentivizes them. In other words, we talk about education reform. You come to me as a ministry and you tell me, well, I educate you about this change, I give you all the information you need, and we have this, enabling environment. I tell you exactly the resources I put in place. I engage you and make sure that at every stage of the reform exercise that you were party to it. But the question that will be asked by teachers, by your membership, by other stakeholders, but what's in it for me now? What are the incentives? That is, how are you going to incentivize continually that we can keep this momentum? And that's what we talk about sustainability, that this can be sustained over time. Because I can tell you this, with any change, it's going to be difficult to make that transit, to move from something that you were accustomed doing for so long. So if, let's say that you were a teacher, you believe in the common entrance, and now there's no common entrance examination, and there's a different type of arrangement. And you're telling me now that the schools are no longer different. The Radisson College is no doubt different from the Darrell Jordan. It's going to be an equal playing field. So obviously there has implications there. I'm trying to be here, I'm just telling you what the story is. How are you going to incentivize teachers to accept this? How are you going to incentivize parents to accept this? What incentives? What can you tell me are the value-added elements from this shift outside of the philosophical rhetoric of its attractiveness? You with me? You see what I'm saying? I'm not here trying to stir you up. I don't want to leave here and then hear you shout that next time you hear you shout things shut down, school shut down. I said, what you went and do now? I don't want that. Okay? But I want you to be a challenge of mind. Challenge of mind. Because before we have challenge of action, we have to have a challenge of mind. That you think about these things. So encouragement. And this then becomes, as I close off here, when we talk about encouragement incentives, let's go back to home. The BUT. And I'm happy that I see other trade unions here. that when it comes to you as a president or those in these positions, and you wonder, and let me just commend you though, the beauty for seeing those increments in membership. That's very good, especially in the time when we have what we call a declining union membership. So I commend you. But how do we keep our members also incentivized? That they want to stay as being part of the union. Not because we're doing the bread and butter issues, or we're not going to just use those. The incentives have to be, what's in it for me? I mean, at the bottom of the executive, or even outside the executive, what benefit is it for me to be part of this trade union? What's the benefit? And you are wanting to think about these things, whether it be rewards or recognition systems that you put in place, because you are still an organization in and of itself. All of the trade unions. So you have to incentivize your membership. The younger people who are now coming up, taking on those new roles, you have to be able to put in the right incentive systems. So, I close with those 4 E's. And my last parting words here is that you continue to respect each other. You continue to respect your parties. My grandmother would tell me, respect is due to the dog. She would tell us so. And I still that even as professors, how you go in society, I don't care. I go back Black Rock, where I come from, I tell the guys, thank you. The guys on the block who look after my grandmother, they're free help. I come and shout them and give them a drink, relax. Because I'm not, and we have to be able to get away from that kind of class struggle. Because if you think about how unions arrived, it was all because of that class, that movement. Recognizing that we are, obviously, this whole fight is beyond the union itself. So I challenge you with those few parting words to continue to remember that 4E framework, to continue to recognize our history, to recognize leadership and the importance of leadership, the importance of communication, the importance of change management. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It was indeed a pleasure.
Remember, I have to stretch before I get back here. Thank you, Professor Devonish. At this time, I'm going to ask our Deputy General Secretary, Ashley Yearwood, to make a presentation on behalf of the beauty.
Boyfriend. Sorry. Oh, yes, that's right.
On behalf of the President, executive members, and the membership of the Barbados Union of Teachers, I would like to thank you for your very insightful presentation. We were indeed educated, and I hope that the union will take the information given to educate, enable, engage, and encourage to take us forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I thought of a 50 effort. You got to put the effort for those 4 E's: the educate, the engage, the enable, and the encourage. No, let me do that. I was just saying that it takes effort. I'm now going to ask Sister Candace Griffith, our treasurer, to move the vote of thanks. Sister Candace.
She had to wear my Trinidadian name. Protocol having been established. Good morning to one and all. I deem it a great honor to move the vote of thanks on any occasion of this great union. So today I am privileged. I want to first say thank you, our sincere gratitude to you, Professor Dwayne Devonish, for a stirring and thought-provoking address to challenge our minds and to encourage us on the way forward. Please ensure that the Ministry of Education is furnished with the 4E framework as we go forward with education reform. Thank you to our specially invited guests for accepting and honoring our invitation to be here today. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, for an address that not only highlighted issues in our schools, but also offered solutions. Likewise, I would like to encourage you in your next correspondence to the ministry to furnish them with these excellent solutions. I would also like to thank you for highlighting the constant agitation of this executive on behalf of the members of the Barbados Union of Teachers. I truly believe we are a great union and our presence is important. And we have made sure that we are out there agitating for our members and we do not take health and safety lightly. Thank you, Madam Chairperson, Sister Sharice Rock, for introducing the guest speaker and for a job well done. Please exercise those old bones. Thank you, Sister Alicia Allen, our third Vice President, for invoking God's presence among us. And sincere thanks to you, Sister Yearwood, for your presentation to Professor Devonish and for expressing our gratitude to him. Thank you, Sister Stacia Springer, for bringing fraternal greetings. And above all, thank you to our members for making this conference, this opening ceremony, a success. Thank you.
That brings us to the end of the opening ceremony. We have only just begun, however, we have a lot of other things to do. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, we will be having a 20-minute break, and we will convene after that 20 minutes for a members-only meeting. So, members of the media, thank you very much for being here with us. We look forward to reading and viewing all of your wonderful statements about the Barbados Union of Teachers and our conference. And at this time, we'll bid adieu to you. Platform, followed by the special invited guests.